Hello and welcome to my video all about my project, my Eastwind jacket. I decided, as this was quite a big project, that I was going to make a video dedicated to just this project, which is going to be recorded in a few different segments. So this is me filming in end of April, start of May, and I am about 3/4 of the way through the body of the project. I'm recording this right after filming my ordinary podcast, so sorry if my voice is a bit frazzled. I'm also having some problems with the light going really yellow, so bear with. If I move, I'm just trying to readjust the light a bit because it's on an auto setting. So if this is the first time you're watching my podcast, my name on Instagram is Orchid's Heart and I live in Birmingham in England, and I have been knitting for about 2 years, maybe 3 I think at this stage. And I have had the Eastwind jacket on my queue for quite a while, mostly because of Cat Weaver. Hers is in like greys and I think it's really beautiful. Every time she wears it, I'm a bit jealous. And just after Christmas this year, my knitting friend told me she was going to cast hers on, and I had massive FOMO, so I ordered my yarn and cast on. I must admit I found this project quite daunting. Let me show you a picture. So it's from this book, Knits About Winter, and you can see it here. It's got like a contrast edge, like exposed seam detail, drop shoulder. She is wearing it on the back, but you can't really see it. But let me find the picture inside the book. So this is a book by Viola. It's really, really pretty. Is this? Okay. The text you can see isn't the pattern, it's the information about the yarns and needles and things to use. So this is the coat. I don't know if you can see, it's got like toggles, pockets, it's quite long. It's really lovely. So yes, I really wanted to make it. It's got an all over texture pattern on it, and it's knit using, I think, a DK and a lace weight. I think that's what it said. DK and a lace weight, I think. Let's look. Yeah, a DK and a lace weight. And then you use like a contrast for the pockets and the edging. And it's got cables down the front, cables down the centre back, quite a deep rib cuff, and like toggles on the front. Yeah. So to do it in a hand-dyed yarn with mohair would have been really expensive. And so at the time when I was looking at deciding what yarns to use, I had just bought in the sale some purpley mohair. And so this mohair is by Kokon, it's in the colour Rust. And I was able to get 5 skeins in the sale. And it's like this really like dusty greyish purple. And I'd also really wanted to try a yarn called Manchelopis, which is an unspun, really soft yarn. It's a Spanish yarn. This one's kind of in a grey-brown colour. I would say that's quite an accurate representation. And so I did a swatch of the two together, and actually they go together really well. This kind of adds a bit of interest to this, because though this is heathered, and it is a nice brown, I'd say it's quite a dull colour. This gives it a bit of like colour interest. And so I decided I should have just enough to knit it in these two. So this is an unspun yarn and it's double stranded on the cake. I have knit with unspun before, mostly, in fact only Manchelopis, which I think has a longer staple length and is much stronger. So I was a bit daunted about trying this because this is really soft. And I decided for my edging, because I did try casting on with the Manchelopis and mohair, and it kept breaking because of the stress when you're doing like a long tail cast on, it just kept breaking. So I decided I'd use some scraps of Plutolopi in this neutral colour to do the edging. So I've been casting on with this because this is much stronger. And this was my swatch. Oh, so this is a swatch of it just on its own. Here we go. Oh, stop getting yellow. There we go. I'm sorry, it does keep going a bit. That's the colour. And you can see the texture, and I was trying to learn the textured stitch. I think I did have a sample with the mohair as well, but I pulled it out because I wanted to make the most of the yarn. And it's really drapey, look at that. It's like really soft. I'm actually looking at that thinking that's very different to my unblocked pieces. So I'm quite excited to see it blocked. Yeah, and so you knit it in pieces. You start by doing one of the fronts. So it's bottom up, so you knit up to the pocket, you split for a pocket, and then you knit, and it's got a drop shoulder, so you do like a chunk of the shoulder. And it's got this cable detail all down the front. Now I've made a couple of changes on this piece already. So I think you were supposed to do a cable cast on when you pick up, because you bind off here and then you cast on to do some stitches up here. I couldn't be bothered faffing with a cable cast on, so I did an ordinary back loop cast on. I think it will be fine because you're going to pick up and knit a pocket. Now I can already see that this is going to have the tendency to drop and you're going to see the inside of the pocket. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to knit the first couple of inches of the inside of the pocket in the same colour as the jacket. Because I'm really short on yarn, I haven't done that yet. I'm going to wait until I've done the neckband, because the other change I've made is that you're supposed to knit the neckband as well at the same time as the pieces, and knit, so it'll be another couple of inches because it'll be a neckband, and then you seam all the pieces together. But I decided I'd like to knit my neckband all in one go, so I have left those stitches live. I'm going to block these 4 pieces when they're done, and then seam them together, and then pick up and knit the neckband all together. It will still be flat because there's obviously the gap down the front, but I'll be knitting those 4 pieces in one continuous, not going back and forth. So I will have to read the pattern of all 4 sections and like write out some instructions for myself. But I think it'll be okay because I think it'll just be the 2 cables on the front, the 2 cables at the back, and then plain in between. So I'll just be making sure I get the right direction for the right cable on the right piece. So yeah, but I will put a lifeline in before I do that so that if I make a mistake I can rip back more easily. So there we go. I am worried that it's going to be too small, but it is measuring how she says it should measure, so I trust that. I also think when it blocks it will get a bit bigger as well. So I have now knit 3 of the 4 panels. I've got my front and back, no, my 2 fronts, sorry. You can see my plain edging and the Plutolopi on the bottom. And I have 1 of my backs. And you can see that all over textured detail. So the other thing that's in the pattern is that the textured detail, so it's like a tilted stitch. On one side it goes that way and on one side it goes that way, so they're kind of like facing in or facing away from each other. When I tried to do the opposite way for the textured stitch on the other side, it didn't look like the textured stitch at all. So I am actually, all of my stitches are going to be going that way in the texture, but I'm actually not that bothered. I don't think it really makes any difference. It just looks like it's meant to be an all over textured stitch, so I'm not worried about that. But yeah, so the there any other changes? I don't think so. Oh, the only thing was I did mess up slightly on one of the fronts. So you're supposed to slip purlwise with yarn in front every first stitch and knit the last stitch regardless of what you're doing. And that's so that you get this really smooth edge, because when you sew it together you have the seam on the outside creating that ridge. However, on one of my fronts down the side I did it wrong and it's all knobbly because I think I wasn't knitting the last stitch, or I wasn't slipping the first stitch. And so if I have that on the outside it's going to be knobbly. So I don't know what I'm going to do. It's only from here to here on one piece. So it might be that I don't have an exposed seam on the underarm, just on the top from here to here, which is a bit of a shame really, because I like that detail of the seam. But I think it'd be better to not have the seam than it be knobbly from here to here. I don't know, let me know what you think. Although actually by the time you see this I probably would have finished it. So that's a bit of a shame. But that's where I am at the moment. I've got my 3 body pieces and I'm about to take a bit of a break from it whilst I work on something else. And I will be picking it up in a couple of weeks to do the next piece. So I will see you in a minute with my future self. I started yesterday evening, Friday after work, and it's now Saturday just after lunch and I've finished. I mentioned yesterday that I was using a different yarn to seam with, and I was using this. We'll see if it focuses, I don't know if it will. So this was just something I have in stash. I don't know what it is, but it kind of matched colour wise. It's quite a smooth yarn. But I did some experiments and it didn't look like you were going to see it, so it didn't really matter what I used, but at least it's close enough. So I started by seaming the shoulders. No, I started by seaming the 2 back pieces together down the back. Then I did the shoulders, and then I did under the arms from the bottom up. Doing from the armpit to the end of the sleeve was a bit fiddly, having had the shoulders already done. So I wonder if actually a better pattern would have been to do up the back, then up under the arms, then the shoulders last, maybe. but I did the shoulders before under the arms because I wanted to see what it was going to look like. Obviously it hangs off a bit weird, but I wanted to have an idea of size. So yeah, so that's what I did. In the pattern, it has you knit 4 pieces, and whilst you're knitting the 4 pieces, you also do a bit of the neck. Then you bind off and you seam all 4 pieces together. I didn't really like the idea of the neck being, like the neck bit being seamed. I also had it in my head that the pattern had more of a funnel neck, and it doesn't. It just has a bit of, I think it might be just stockinette rather than in pattern. Possibly, I might be wrong. And it ends up lying flat, or at least because of the weight of the jumper and the wideness of the neck, ends up lying flat on the shoulders, so it doesn't come up the neck at all. Apologies, I think it's getting really light and dark quite quickly outside because probably it's going to start raining soon. But I wanted to knit the neck bit all in one go. And so when it started giving instructions for the neck bit, I stopped and put the stitches on hold, which is why I've got so many cables. And I must admit, all of these cables are kind of weighing it down at the moment. But I'm going to put it on and see if you can see a bit what I mean by how big it is. So I've still got to knit down the middle like a button placket. But hopefully you can see how like massive it is, but also how wide it is across the shoulders, like it's hanging off. So that's too early to start like a neck. The neck needs to be over here, not over here. So I think I read that a couple of people bound off some extra stitches and seamed those together before doing the neck. So I've put this like here as a bit of, maybe that's how far extra I'm going to seam. I think maybe 1 or 2 less. And I'm going to bring that up on both sides, which is a little bit tricky to show you, I'm sorry. And then I will pick up around the neck, maybe do a round or 2, and then start decreasing and see if I can make that funnel neck situation. I will obviously put lifelines in because I don't know how that's going to go. But I would like kind of a standy up neck that kind of buttons up over each other. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be huge. You then pick up and you do like a ribbed cuff. And again, I'm wondering, because this is quite wide, I don't know how it's going to look. That's a much wider sleeve than I would have liked. I mean, my arms are quite skinny, but I know I'm going to be wearing overcoats, so obviously I don't want the cuff to be wrist tight. I think I will knit maybe this much ribbing and see how much it's cinched it in, and then see whether, so it's hard to decrease and rib, isn't it? So actually that's going to be a challenge. I did think I've just decreased, but actually that will end up being quite messy unless on the seam do a centre decrease or centre double decrease, or I don't know. Gonna have to think about that. By the time you see this, it'll be too late to offer me your advice. Yeah, I didn't think of that. So I don't know what I'm gonna do. I guess knit the cuff and see how big and baggy it is and how much it just pulls in, and then take it from there. And the other thing is, because I mentioned before that I forgot to slip the first stitch on one of the front sides when I was doing it. So I have the exposed seam on top, but I don't have it on the sides until the armpit, and then it has on the sleeves. And actually I wasn't going to do that under the arms, but the way the edges are, because of this is like a cast on edge, because you go from it being on the side to the bottom of the edge of the knitting, it actually was quite easy to have an exposed seam here because where you're like sewing together changes. But yeah, I'm kind of happy so far. I think once I've sorted the shoulders out and I've done the neck, it will be much easier to see where it's going and what it's going to look like. At the moment, it just feels like a tent that doesn't stay on. It just falls off. So that's where I am at the moment. So it's a couple of days later, I've done a bit more work, and I wanted to update you as to where I'd got to, because I've made a few more modifications. So it's getting quite heavy now. So I think last time I showed it to you, I was working on the neck and trying to close it up. So I am quite pleased as to where I have gotten with it. Let me try it on and show you. So the neck is still on hold. But as you can see, it's got quite a high, like, funnel neck. Ignore the holes, I'll explain the holes in a minute, which is exactly what I wanted. The reason why it's still on hold is because I've got to pick up and do the button bands, and then do the contrast edging, like on the bottom around the top. I think in the original pattern, the contrast edging goes on before the button bands, so it doesn't extend for the width of the button band, but I want it all to be like uniform, and you know, I think that's what will look best. Because I think my neckband will be quite prominent, because it's going to be like right here. So to do this, let me get a bit closer actually. Sorry, I've actually broken my tripod, so this is leaning against a water bottle. So what I did, and the reason why I've left the holes for now, is because this is where the seaming ended before, at the start of this hole. And as you can see, that means the neck would have been from here to here. You do then like pick up and knit, sorry, this is where the body knitting ended, and then it then wanted you to start knitting like the neck section before seaming it together. I wanted to knit mine all in one go together. So I had it sort of joined up, but before picking up and knitting the neck, I decided to seam up an extra 6 stitches either side. I could have done more, but I think it's worked out okay. So I did that, I bound off an extra 6 stitches. I then picked up all of the live stitches around all 4 pieces, which obviously seamed up at the back, and everywhere else. And I started knitting. So it's a little bit confusing because all of the cables are at different points and facing different directions, and like there's the patterning on the main body. So at this point I can kind of tell by looking at the cables which row I'm on, but to remember whether it was like a forward cable or a back cable, I colour coded them with clips. So this is a green one, this is a pink one, and then there's a green and a pink clip in the back. So I think the green ones, like the stitches came forward, the pink ones, the stitches came back when you were doing a cable. And I kind of chose, well, I kind of knew where that was happening depending on like how many stitches I had. I could kind of tell at that point. In terms of the patterning, because of the decreases I then started doing, it is a bit all over the place, but it doesn't really matter because of all the decreases, and it's just a texture stitch. So I picked up, I knit a row like all the way around, and then when I was purling the row, I decreased a stitch either side of the seam here. I then knit another row and I did the same. I decreased a stitch either side, and I carried on like decreasing along the seam line until it was snug enough that I thought I could start knitting straight to get my funnel. Because I don't want it to be too tight, because I will probably be wearing scarves underneath or over the top. I'm also going to knit the storm hood in like matching yarn, so that would tuck in as well. So I want there to be a bit of space. I also don't want it to be like too tight. So, but I want it to be able to stand up. So at the moment it's flopping a bit. I don't know if that's because of this or whether it will flop unless done up. But you know, it looks fine. I think it'll be okay. And when I put the button band and everything else in, that might give it a bit more substance. So I've done that. Now that I've shown you that, I am probably going to go and finish seaming up those shoulder holes, as you can see. And I need to like seam a bit here, even though it is knitted together, it's pulling on the stitches a bit, so I'm going to seam it together so that all that closes up and it looks like a seam. Now when I started knitting together, the seam kind of stops, but I'm okay with that, like, because it will just show as a shoulder seam and won't go all the way up the neck. The seam would have gone all the way to the neckband had you done as the pattern suggested, which I obviously haven't. So yes. So the other thing I've done is I've done one of my cuffs. So it's quite a deep cuff. You know, it can be pulled down to cover my hand. I don't know if when I block it whether this is going to get longer or shorter. But to be honest, I kind of came to the end of my ball of unspun Manchelopis, so I decided to end it there. That is the length I normally do for garments. And I'd probably be wearing this with gloves or mittens, so I think it's okay. And I know I was worried about the width of the sleeve, but I've got a jumper on right now, and I think that's quite good. I'm happy with that because I can still get a glove on. I think it's okay. And you know, I can, if I want to, I can roll the cuff up. You know, so I haven't trimmed any of my ends yet because it needs to be blocking. So that it's out the way if I'm doing something. And I don't know if you can see, but probably not. I'd probably have to put a photo in. The cuff is knit with the darker mohair because I've run out of my main mohair now. So I have knit the cuff with the darker mohair, so the cuff is a bit darker. The neck is a bit as well because that was knit with the darker mohair. It is what it is. The button band will be a bit darker. The other thing I've done is I have knit one of my pockets, which I didn't enjoy doing and then realised I did it wrong. And that might be partly why I didn't enjoy doing it. So when I was knitting it, like the main panel, it said something about provisional cast on, leaving stitches live, something. I'm not really sure. I couldn't be bothered, so I bound off, as you can see here. So I think this was meant to be a provisional cast on up here, and this was bound off. And I just thought, I'll just pick up around the hole and knit a pocket, it'll be fine. I reread the instructions afterwards, and you were supposed to pick up along the provisional cast on edge, like unravel it, whatever you're meant to do, knit just a single piece down to where it told you to put some removable stitch markers. No, sorry, you were meant to pick up, because as you're knitting it, you put some removable stitch markers onto the back of the piece. You're meant to pick up stitches along the back there and knit a flap up to the length of where your provisional cast on was on, and then graft it together. It doesn't say anything about then seaming up the side of the pocket, because if you do that, it's anchored to the bottom and the top and not the sides. I mean, I'm assuming you just sew the sides down, but it doesn't, unless I'm mistaken, I'm pretty sure I read it several times, it doesn't say anything about then sewing the sides together. So anyway, I haven't done that. But the other thing is you knit it on a smaller needle size. So most of this is knitted in 4mm needles, and the pockets you do in 3.5. And that's why I didn't enjoy doing it, because I was knitting a pocket on 3.5mm needles, 2 strands of unspun and 1 strand of mohair. So it was really dense. Took quite a while for what it is, and it hurt my hands a bit. But I want it to be dense because I want it to be strong. And the other thing was I knit my pocket a bit longer than suggested because my phone is massive. I think phones got bigger in the last couple of years, and so it had to be a bit deeper for my phone to fit in, and if I'm honest, it does only just fit. So I might make the other one like a little bit longer if I can be bothered. But I was determined last night before I went to bed I was going to bind the pocket off. The other thing is my seam, because I just did a 3 needle, I just knit round and round and round and round and round, and I did a 3 needle bind off. I kind of wish the seam was not on the inside of the pocket but on the other side. I could unpick it and redo like the seam from the other side, but honestly I'm not sure the unspun would handle it. It will probably break, so it's probably not a good idea. I might try and make sure that on the other pocket that I put the seam like here instead, just because that will feel nicer in the pocket. The other thing is I think it might be easier to keep the pocket clean. You know, like dust and stuff gets in pockets. Like if the seam won't catch them as much if it's that way around. So yeah, so my pocket's much bulkier is what I'm trying to say than it's intended to be. But it does also feel much stronger and much more secure. So I'm not mad about that. I think it's okay. But the other thing I'm going to change, which actually I'm just going to grab, is I'm going to put a button in the middle of the pocket and then do like a little loop. A bit like how I will do the fastenings on the front. So to match that, just because if my phone or something's in my pocket or there's something in my pocket and I don't want it to fall out, it just makes me feel a bit more secure. But you know, I don't have to have it done up, I can just leave the loop loose if I want to. But also with both of those things, if it turns out it's something that I find annoying, I'll be able to remove both without making any like impact on the garment itself. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's looking. It's starting to really look like a coat now. And I also kind of feel like the end is nigh. So I've still got to do both button bands, one cuff and one pocket, the edge, and then sew these holes up. So I guess the next time I show you, I probably would be finished. I don't know if I'm going to film another segment before finishing or not. We shall see. But yeah, exciting. Sorry, I'm doing a balancing act with my phone. Okay. I think it's going to stay up. I mentioned in the previous video, which is completely out of sync with these Eastwind segments, that I smashed the bit that you put on the tripod to connect to your phone. So this is balanced on top of a jam jar, supported by a packet of hot chocolate. So we'll see how well this holds. It's a really dark, gloomy day as well, so I apologise about the light. I think this is as much light as I'm going to get. The rain is hammering it down. Anyway, let me grab my Eastwind. I've been waiting for the sun to come up a bit more so that it'd get light enough to show you, and so I picked up some stitches on another section, which was really daft. I should have waited because I now have my unspun attached to it again. We all know that's a delicate situation to be in. So I think this is going to be the penultimate segment, the last work in progress segment. So I am nearly done and I'm so excited. I cannot wait. I'm just unwinding some yarn so that I've got a bit of movement space. So I'm trying to remember where I got to last time. I think I'd done one of the pockets, one of the cuffs. Not started the button band, I don't think. So I'm going to try and put this on. I don't think I'd finished the neck either. Just move the arm to the other side. Sorry, I think it's trying to compensate for the light, so it's getting a bit blown out at points. But so I've finished my pockets. They're looking quite chunky because nothing's been blocked. I also finished the neck. So I decided to go ahead and do the contrast edging separate to the button band, because I realised at the bottom it would be separate because I'd already done it. So I thought I would do it separate so it matches top and bottom. I've done one of my button bands, which I'm going to talk about. Both my pockets. I did the second pocket the same way as the first one. However, I did bind off the bottom on the outside of the pocket so that the seam wasn't inside the pocket, unlike the seam being in the pocket for the first one. I don't think I'm going to unpick it and re-seam the other one, just because it is unspun and it's quite difficult to do that with. So my other pocket is neater on the inside. It's all learning, I'm not mad. So the collar is going to look like this. Sorry, I just washed my hair, so I can't tie it up, otherwise it'll go really kinky. So the collar will look like this. I've sewn up the remaining holes in my shoulders, so you've got a better idea now what the sleeve is going to look like. It's quite a big sleeve. It has a tendency to pull forward, but I don't know if that's because I haven't finished the front yet, so the width in the front isn't there yet. I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out when I've finished. So, God, it's really warm. That's a good sign. I can really feel the difference between the block sections and the unblocked sections. And it's just so soft where it's been blocked. It's definitely a little bit stiffer where it's not been blocked. So I actually have a wool wash setting on my machine, like a stone cold wool wash, or like just a tap temperature wool wash. And I have a couple of finished objects. I've got a jumper and a pair of socks that are finished. I mean, this is nearly finished. When I finish my second button band, I'm going to stick all three things in the wool wash, as well as anything else that needs washing, like whatever socks need to go in. My jumpers aren't getting a lot of wear at the moment because it's quite warm. And I am going to do that because it spins out a lot more moisture than I can get out from soaking in the tub and then squeezing out with towels. And being this is quite a big, heavy garment, I definitely think that's a good thing, because I'm a little bit worried about it drying. It is fairly warm at the moment, but our temperatures are really fluctuating. Like, we had a really hot day a couple of days ago, but the day before that it was like autumn. So I need a couple of warm days to really dry this out at the best of times. So I don't take any chances by it being any damper than it needs to. I don't think this is something I'll be able to wash in the winter, because I simply don't think it would dry. It's so thick and there's so much of it. And especially places where my double width button band, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and my pockets and things like that are going to be really thick, like 3 layers of 2-strand unspun and mohair. That's quite a lot of like wool. So I don't know what I'm going to do to make that dry up quicker and blocking. I might put a blocking mat between the pocket and the inside. Yeah, because if I lie it down just as it is, it's going to be the back, the 2 layers of the pocket, and then the front. So I might put some blocking mats in between either side of the pocket just to increase the airflow. And I'm going to put it in our bedroom, which is in the attic, which is the warmest part of the house. Obviously heat rises, so it stands the best chance of drying out. Now my button bands, I'm going to talk about this because I've done different to what they told you to do. In the pattern it says just to pick up a certain amount of stitches, knit a certain amount of rows and bind off. And it's in stockinette, so it's going to curl. Like, the main complaints on the pattern were that the button band curls and the neck is too wide and it falls off the shoulders. So I knew that was 2 things that I really wanted to avoid. And so I knit my button band as per instructions almost, but I knit the last 2 rows so that they were like pearl knit, whatever, and then bound off in a much bigger needle. So I've knit this in a 4mm needle and I bound off on a size 6mm needle, and it was too tight and it was pulling it up. So I decided to not do that. And I posted on Instagram, does anybody have any ideas? Because I think I'd tried binding off in a couple of different ways and didn't really work out. And Marina Skewer said do a half stretchy bind off, so yarn over every other stitch and bind off. And Kat Weaver said, because she's made one before, actually she's the reason why I made this one, she wishes she had knit it twice the width and stitched it down with a purl row in the middle. So I decided I was going to do both of those things, which is what I've done here. So it would stitch down and, can you maybe see it better there? It would stitch down with a purl bump edge to give it a clean edge, and then the thickness should stop it from rolling, and you just stitch down that bound off edge on the back to where it's joined onto the cable panel. So, but the thing is, my bind off, even with the half stretchy bind off, is still too tight and it's pulling it up. I don't think you see this is much straighter, and this is just, you can see here it's pulled up. So I'm gonna have to unpick the bind off again, and I'm gonna do like a full stretchy bind off and yarn over on every stitch when I bind off. So think of me when I'm unpicking this, because I'm not looking forward to unpicking the bind off again. Needles flying around. So when I do, I'm gonna finish knitting this button band, and then with the super stretchy, well, the stretchy bind off, and then I will unpick that one and do it again. I will then, I'll probably seam down, no, I will seam down the top and bottom, but not the back of it, so that I can pin it down more easily when I block it. I will then wash it, let it dry, and then that's when I'm going to attach the button loops, because I could do that from the inside. I could knot the ends of the button loops and have them coming out of the purl bump, or just under the purl bump. It might look a bit neater, and then all the mess can be concealed inside. And then with the button side, I can stitch them to the top of the button band and then hide the ends, and then stitch the back down. I think that'd look really neat. So the side that has the buttons on, the button band is double the width than the side with the loops on, and I think that's so that you have a bit going under, so there is less of a gap. So I just need to make sure my loops aren't too long so that the gap doesn't stretch. So that's going to be like an exercise, and I might have to give it a couple of goes. So yeah, I'm nearly there, and I'm excited. So I am going to go and crack on. The other thing I've noticed is that some of my seams, like here, I can kind of see through where I've seamed it. So I, either before or after I've blocked it, I might need to do some more reseaming. I might block it and see whether it still looks gappy, and then block it again. I think it's partly because the yarn I'm using to seam it is like a sleek yarn. It's not woolly like this, so it doesn't like plump up and fill the gaps in the same way. If I could spin, I would spin some of this unspun and use that, but I can't, so I can't. So I'm doing the best I can. Maybe I should have learnt to spin, because it's roving, so I think actually it would be quite easy. Maybe I should have learnt to spin on like a spindle to do this, but honestly that sounds like a level of faff I can't be bothered with. I am on the urge of considering learning to spin, so I do think it's going to be one of those things where I'm going to be like, if I'd waited another month or another couple of months, then I could have. But I'm excited this is nearly done, so I'm going to leave it there, and the next one I'll be showing you it finished. I'm so excited. You've probably seen some little videos of me wearing it, so I'm just going to be brief because I think this video is quite long now. But yes, it's finally done. It's only taken me 8 months maybe. So I'll just give you a bit of a brief overview, but you've probably seen most of this already. So it's got these really deep squishy cuffs. It's got this really thick double layer button band. So this is how it looked finished and on the inside. So I've never done this with a button band before, and I actually think I quite like it. I'm thinking like for a steeked button band it might be a really good idea. I think it looks really neat on the inside. Let me show you again. So, and I think it just gives it a really nice finish, especially with the pearl bump in the middle. Like it just gives that really crisp fold over. So that's really lovely. And then on the other side it has these loops and a narrower fold over button band. And then you've seen the pockets and everything else. So I am really, really, really pleased. You can see a bit of colour difference where I've switched from a different colour of mohair. But to be honest, I don't think anybody is going to notice that whilst I'm wearing it. So it is quite heavy. There's quite a lot of fabric, but the fabric itself is quite light. I have been wearing it quite a bit already. I have to say I think I prefer it with trousers rather than with skirts or dresses because of the length of it. I find this with most of my coats. If the coat cuts halfway down my skirt length, I feel a bit funny about it. So it'd have to be very short for me to wear this with a dress or something. But over trousers it has been super cosy. And to be honest, I have been wearing it in the house as a large cardigan and as a dressing gown. So I think I'm going to get a lot of wear out of it. Now that it's finished and I've had a bit of a pause from making it, did I enjoy making it? I think parts of it I enjoyed, parts of it I found quite tedious. I think knitting it from unspun made it a bit more challenging, a bit of a longer project, because once you get into the the flow of it, it's not that complicated once I got my head around the different moving parts. But because it was unspun, I had to do it at home in the evenings, so it definitely took longer. But I like the lightness the unspun gives. Would I have knit it with unspun without mohair? Definitely not. I'm now knitting the storm hood in the Manchelopis without mohair, and it feels way too delicate. I think the mohair has definitely given it some stability, some feels a little bit more hard wearing. It is next to skin soft in most places except on my chest. I do find with the high neck is a little bit itchy on my neck if I'm wearing a low top. I mean, not so much my neck, I guess the top of my chest, like here. So if I'm wearing a lower neck top, that's a bit of an issue. So I'm just a bit mindful about what I'm wearing underneath it. But you know, this is depths of the winter item, so really, you know, I know I am wearing it now. So I think that's fine. But yeah, overall, I'm really pleased. It's very squishy, it's very soft, it's very warm. It is quite big, but that's what I wanted. So probably not much good for like going on holiday and stuff like that, unless it's a holiday in England where we're going on cold walks. But yeah, I'm really pleased, and I hope this video was interesting. I know it ended up being quite long, so I'm sorry about that. I was hoping it would only be half an hour. I think it might be double that. But let me know if this kind of video works for you or doesn't, whether there's anything that you'd like to see in these kinds of videos. I don't know how often I will do a project specific video because it is a lot of work, and I don't know how many projects really warrant it. I feel like with something like the Eastwind, where I did make quite a lot of alterations and hacks, and it was quite a big, long, involved project, it made sense. But I'm not sure I've got anything queued up for a while that I feel like that much of a deep dive would make sense. But thank you for watching. I hope if you are, you know, thinking of doing an Eastwind or partway through it and put it down, that this inspires you to finish, because I do think it's worth persevering, definitely. And yeah, and also about 2 weeks ago I put up a video with like a giveaway, and I said that I would announce the winner in my next video, and I was naughty because I didn't in the last one, so I am going to do it now. So this person on the screen here, you've won the autumn stitch markers. Please do get in contact and let me know. Probably get the quickest response sending me a direct message on Instagram, But if you're not on Instagram, you can pop me an email, or if you shoot me a message on YouTube. Is that possible? I think it is, I'm not sure. Yeah, my email, maybe I'll put that on the screen. You can just pop me an email or a message on Instagram. I am quick to respond on Instagram generally though. So thank you very much. I hope you all enjoy your cosy knitting, and talk soon. Bye. Thank you.